You're listening to Merykid Explains, an oral history of one artist's discography featuring facts, feelings, and most importantly, context. Now, maybe you stumbled here by accident, or perhaps you're listening on some faraway planet in some distant time, vibing off an ancient method of communication. Or maybe, just maybe, you're one of the dozens of die-hard Merykid fans that actually finds value in this content. Regardless, feel free to sit back, get comfortable, and listen along to the gentle ramblings of a man and his memories. This is Merykid Explains. You know, when I reference in the intro to this series that there are potentially dozens of Merykid fans who are listening, what I mean by that is I feel like there are about 12 people who have gotten this far into the series and have expressed enough interest in my life and career and possibly friendship and maybe some sort of familial obligation that has made them come this far. And of those 12 definite listeners, at least 6 of them were brought here through some kind of like nefarious promise of them being mentioned or something, right? So however you got here, all 12 of you, anywhere between 6 to 12 of you, I would love to pose the question, what do the words gentleman streets mean to you? Because to me, gentleman streets means a lot. I'll get to the core of kind of the motivation of this record. You have to remember, 2012, Texas Weather, the sort of the tail end of the Great 85. When the Great 85 ends, I've still got a ton of connections and a ton of opportunities. We're talking big things like South by Southwest and stuff where I just needed to show up as something. And I did not want to do it alone. I didn't want to go back to folk music, so I brought on Mike Randolph, who performs as Polysynth Fusion. He is a sort of like modular synthesis sound manipulator wizard who basically, he and I would show up to venues and I would play some songs on maybe like a drum machine or something on the guitar. And then behind me would just be the absolute most insane, chaotic hurricane of sound. And it was this really hilarious at times sort of experiment, what I considered the most punk rock thing that I've ever done, which was just to sort of bombard the listener or viewer with whatever came out of the two of us performing in that moment. And to be honest, we had fans. Mike more so than myself, really. Like I said and explained in the last one, there were a great deal of older generation men who took a huge took a huge liking to Mike. The way that you imagine, like, in 2022, like a Harry Styles concert, how women would just kind of flock to the stage, that's how old men with ponytails and Pink Floyd t-shirts would stand at the stage to watch Mike manipulate sound waves while I was also there. So the Texas Weather was a formidable choice to let to land the plane, so to speak, of the momentum that I had created from the Great 85. But even that came to an end as I allowed myself to finally feel my feelings and step away from the stage. The thing I had been pursuing full-time at the expense of so much of my 20s, of my youth, of my freedom, of just like the semblance of a normal life. And by that, I mean to be in your 20s is to date and get a job to which you will then have money that you can spend on things like your own place to live, etc. I forewent all of that in the greater pursuits of thinking, just go full force music, give it my 20s, it'll be worth it in the end. And it was not. Or at least that's what I had decided at the end of 2012. And so really I did probably the nicest thing that I had done to myself and for myself in a very long time. And I simply stopped playing music. I got a job. I had some money. I got an apartment. I started dating. I started sleeping more, drinking more water. I started living a world where I wasn't paid in beer or attempted to pay in beer in lieu of actual financial compensation for the hours of work I was putting into shows and things like that. I just became a normal person. And it was nice. I'm not going to lie. I recall that time, late 2012, just being a breath of fresh air. Anything new is of value if it's walking away from something that had become kind of toxic. And being a musician had become toxic for me. And I had also become toxic, in regard to being a musician. So those things needed to stop. They did. And I just kind of became a regular person. I, like I said, got a job, got a place, started dating, started hanging out with friends, etc. The itch to make music never went away, but I was tired. And so mentally, there had, if I was going to make music, it was on a completely new set of terms. That, of course, was that I was going to make electronic music. That was really what it amounted to. It started with a friend at the time, fellow artist in San Antonio, who back then she went by Daniela Riojas. I don't even know what she goes by now. I think she's some sort of mystical tree person who lives in like the villages of Peru or something. She has gone on to become. The last video I saw of her, she was like dancing in a river playing a flute that she like whittled out of a tree or something. I don't know. But anyway, in 2012, Daniela was just a sort of like another person in San Antonio trying to figure it out. And she just casually mentioned that she wanted to release some music, and I thought to myself, what if I made some beats? What if I could? I think I could. I had a cracked version of Ableton, and I had cobbled together little bits and pieces of MIDI controllers and things, and I went at it. And what I had wasn't great, but it was interesting. It was certainly kind of a new lane for me creatively, and Daniela was starting out, so she didn't have the right set of standards for what she was willing to sing over yet. And thus, we came up with a song. It was called Sunrays. And we released it. She shot a video, and it was great. She's a very creative and beautiful person, so this video, went over very well. I got a lot of attention from a group of listeners that I had never had access to at this point, which was the sort of more electronic crowd. This, I had done folk and I had done rock, but I had never tapped into the electronic scene, which was very much prevalent, and really so, like, becoming the sort of dominant force in pop culture. Again, this is 2012, so we're living in the sort of blog house. Neon Indian had just released Era Extraña. I think Washed Out had just done that other one. I don't remember what it's called, but he had just put out his full length with the Flower Paracosm, maybe? I don't know. Anyway, electronic music was just everywhere. It was everything. And she was super creative, and I got inspired. And when we put out this track, it was like, oh, I didn't have to pay anybody to do this. I didn't have to, kill myself testing these songs in front of a crowd of ungrateful so-and-sos. I didn't have to stay out all night and get paid in liquor and wells and pray that I made it home with a bevy of other San Antonio drivers who've been out way too late or in the mix. No, I got to make it all from my living room in my cool new apartment that I was living at, and it was on this new laptop that I had bought, and it was cool. Like, I suddenly was like an electronic producer. That just sort of fit with what I wanted in life. That fit me just fine. That was a hat that I was willing to put on my cap. My cap? That was a cap I was willing to put on my head. Yeah, that's the right way to say it. So we did that track, and then we started working on a few others, and what I found myself doing was making as much electronic music as possible, but, given in the vein of stuff that I was listening to. Daniela actually introduced me to James Blake at that time. She's the one who she gave me like all of his albums on like a thumb drive, and when I listened to James Blake, the work that had come out of his at that point, I was not the same person after listening to it. You talking about his early works, like the early EPs, before he even put out his first record, the CMYK EP and some other ones. When I listened to them in 2012 in my apartment, wanting to get into electronic music, what I heard was something I had never heard before. It was like opening up my eyes to a new color. It's just one of those things. Everybody has those moments where the music becomes a drug that suddenly you get wide-eyed and you're seeing things and feeling things and blah blah blah. But James Blake's early work was that to me. And I would hold that anybody in 2012 listening to that music probably felt the same way. I mean, the dude's super famous now, rightfully so, very talented. So what I was suddenly injected with was like a whole new lane of music. It was easier to make. It was way more gratifying. It was right in line with where like pop culture had shifted. I think Justin Bieber was getting ready to drop an album with Skrillex and Diplo. Everything was just going electronic, and so I was right there with it. It was easy. It was fun. I stopped holding myself accountable to some standard that was simply impossible to meet. I just grew up a little bit. I was a little bit nicer to myself. And what that resulted in was the fundamental bones, like the foundation of what would become the record Gentleman Streets. Now, what's really funny is that my greatest motivation for this record, and again, this is 2012, my motivation for this album was that I was going to fill the void that had been left completely blank by Justin Timberlake when he released Future Sex Love Sounds and then completely disappeared. I think he was dating Cameron Diaz. He decided to try to become an actor, and he did an okay job in at least one movie, The Social Network, but with that being said, he had really set a standard for pop music. Lady Gaga had completely taken the baton from him and just dominated the late 2000s, early 2010s with her over-the-top electro pop. And I felt like there was something missing, kind of like what the Great 85 was doing for the White Stripes. I saw this hole of Justin Timberlake just being gone, and I thought, okay, there's my angle, my niche right there. And so Gentleman Streets was this fully electronic, sort of experimental in the production side of things, where it was like trying to experiment with the way that the songs interlocked with each other and kind of danced. It was like electronic music, which was indie, but there were pop hooks, which most of pop music at this point has just become that. It's sort of unapologetically mass appealing right now in 2022, but in those days we were still trying to find the line between allowing ourselves to be pop musicians while being indie or whatever that meant. And indie in 2012 meant electronic. So it was like doing an indie electronic record, which meant it was pop, but it was a little bit weirder. But at the same time, it was leaning solely on my looks, the suits I was wearing, the look. Everything was shot in black and white. It was very much a stylized adult version of Merykid, which, funny enough, what I ended up doing on this record, on Gentleman Streets, was releasing an entire, like a full-length album, 10 tracks, and I didn't even release it as Merykid. I released it as Nick Mary. That was actually under the suggestion of my publicist, if I'm not mistaken. It was release it as Nick Mary, and that was just the way to sort of signal that I was growing up, or that this was a change or a shift, and I was all for it. I was all for anything. I was all for anything that was easy and different and set aside me from Merykid and all of the energy that I had carried into the last 5 years of my life. And so Gentleman Streets, that's what it became, and we started doing the press photos were me in a suit leaning against a lamp post. Everything just started, suddenly on social media, you started seeing me in suits, and I was out drinking scotch. I was in limousines with cigars and women, and like beautiful women in dresses. If some of you remember that time where the Gentleman Streets era, which was late 2012 and then into 2013, was just all style, and it was all this pursuit of like an image of a kind of like adult, sophisticated Robin Thicke, what we thought he was before we found out he was gross. But really, like the thing that Justin Timberlake had sort of established before he left, which was a little bit weirder than pop, but a little bit more business savvy than indie. And so, with the image set in place, the music, this is what the original music was. It was 10 tracks. It was pretty weird. Gentleman Streets, like the full-length album, was pretty weird. And it was all beat-driven. And the cover of the record, this was something really interesting. The cover of the album, I actually asked several artists to submit their ideas for the album. Just to see. And Mike Randolph from Polysynth Fusion, the guy that I was in Texas Weather with, he submitted something that was so interesting. It was this really psychedelic cover. It was like me, and there were filters. Like he had turned my hair green, and there was like 50 of my faces just sort of like going in all directions. There was really something to it, and to this day, 2022, 9 years later, Jared Stevens, my longtime friend and collaborator, who would also produce Gentleman Streets, he really believes that if I had chosen that cover, that this record would have been received the way it was supposed to, which was like a much weirder, psychedelic, maybe even like what Tame Impala is achieving now. Like that's the lane that it would have been, sort of indie pop, or pop with an absolute embrace of psychedelic indie. And and I'll never forget, I actually posted Mike's copy, and it was not received well by my friends on Facebook or whatever. I think I did like a poll, and people kind of laughed at that one, and they didn't really get it. But Jared, who, again, if you remember, had the vision of the Magic Attic being what it should have been, like when he put that real psychedelic touch to it, he saw that cover as being the right one. And if I could go back now, I would choose that cover. I would 100%. I wish I had. But I wasn't interested in pushing the boundaries anymore in that way. I was so fucking tired of trying that it was just doing at this point. So I stuck to the vision. Gentleman Streets was a whole vibe of suits and ties. Yeah, so Gentleman Streets was a vibe of suits and ties. And suddenly, just suddenly, as is my luck, right? And, I can't help but think, in moments like this, as I'm about to describe, you gotta assume that God is just sort of pushing the buttons a little bit just to kind of get a rise out of me or anyone in a situation like this. I shit you not that maybe like December of 2012 or January of 2013, once I had already established Gentleman Streets was coming out, why it was coming out, which was to fill this gap that Justin Timberlake had left. Justin Timberlake had not released music at this point in 6 years. He had announced that he had retired from music. There was no safer bet that this lane was open, and I cannot make this up. January of 2013, this man releases a fucking trailer of him walking into a studio and announces that he's back. Why? God, why? Why? If it had been 6 months earlier, I wouldn't have gone the fucking Gentleman Streets route. If it had been 6 months later, I could have established the Gentleman Streets idea. But no. In direct conflict of Gentleman Streets coming out, Justin Timberlake decides to drop another album, and it's the 2020 Experience, arguably his best record ever. Even more indie and psychedelic than Future Sex Love Sounds. Everything that I thought I could possibly do with my minuscule budget of me producing my own record for the first time ever, Justin Timberlake and Timbaland decide, oh, well, we're going to do the exact same thing, only with millions of dollars, and Rick Rubin and Pharrell kind of in the corner, just sort of like giving us pointers as we change the way that music is listened to for the next year. It was so fucking frustrating, and let's also take a step back and say, like, yes, at the time, my ego was big enough to where I felt that my competition in music was Justin Timberlake. That is not, like, let's not, that should not be overlooked. And in fact, that was something pointed out to me by my friend Brandon McCormick at the time. He was like, only you could think that Justin Timberlake releasing an album is like in a conflict to you. But I did, and I really felt it. It was so weird that I knew in my gut, like my instincts were like screaming that the world wanted more Justin Timberlake. And I just moved faster, unbeknownst that I was 1,000% right, and that Justin Timberlake also heard those cries from the universe. And he gave us the record that he needed to make. It's the best one he's ever done, 2020 Experience. My God, that record's so good. I just came off, and it was way too late in the game for me to just stop and pivot. Couldn't do it. I was stuck, completely riding the coattails of Justin Timberlake. It was so frustrating, and yet what I deserved, apparently, because I had already at this point sort of established that my relationship to music was tumultuous at best, and like I really put negative energy. A lot of Gentleman Streets was built out of a negative energy, like a negative energetic space. I don't know how to explain it. It was a lot of me just like this was being made because I was so not into so many things. This was me. This was like I think there's like a version of Majin Buu that exists from the negative space. Like it's like Kid Buu or something like that. I don't remember. Whatever that is, whatever version of Majin Buu exists that's only negative energy, or whatever entity in Dragon Ball Z or any anime, that's what Gentleman Streets was, and that's what I had become. This sort of, maybe like more along the lines of how The Weeknd kind of perceived himself as this sort of vampire-esque late nights, like once 2 a.m. hits or 4 a.m. and the bars are over, it's like now my night starts and like cue the song starting. Right? So Gentleman Streets was coming from a weird place, but I was also in a very motivated and inspired place because I had my intention set and I had this sort of new interest in electronic music, and people were paying attention because I was the best I've probably ever looked, the loudest I've ever been in regard to, social media presence. I had the money, not a lot, but I had the money to pay my publicist again, who now, the one I had been working with at the time, had just sort of like gone up another level. And so I had a lot in motion, and it's like I was sitting at the card table and I have pocket aces, and I'm waiting, and I know I'm about to just shock the world. And then someone catches, 2 kings on the flop, and just like, they should have folded. Justin Timberlake should have stayed an actor. Damn it. But no, he caught his kings, and the rest was history. So, Gentleman Streets, the 10-track version released by Nick Merry, a much weirder and a much darker album that leans more on indie electronic. And this is where Carlton Zeus comes in. So Carlton Zeus is a rapper he's based in San Antonio, and in 2013, when I was making Gentleman Streets, the full version of it, he was just getting ready to sort of hit his stride. Now, he had hit national attention because he had made a song, a little party rap song, and it was called like Red Solo Cup. I don't even remember what it was called. It was heavily featuring Red Solo Cups, and Tim McGraw or whatever broed out country star whose entire image was like red Solo Cups. Maybe he had a song called Red Solo Cup. He made a national interview. He did a national interview about Carlton Zeus's song, bashing it, and that just got so much attention to Carlton Zeus. This kid, like at the time he was a kid, he wasn't that much older than me. Like he was just in his 20s. He was just this guy. He's a rapper. He was really fun. He was, people were calling him the Kanye West of San Antonio back when, Kanye was actually a likable person or trying to be likable. And Zeus was just really interested in having a good time. So, he's rapping about parties and beers and drinking and stuff. And here comes Toby whatever or Tim whoever, and he totally made it worse for him, and then just kickstarted Carlton Zeus's career. He could not have done a nicer thing by trying to like ruin Carlton Zeus, right? So Zeus suddenly has all this attention, and now he's trying to, Zeus, the sort of ultimate businessman when it comes to music, especially back then, 9 years ago, even then. All he thought about was just, strategy. It was all strategy, and he was sort of scouting different musicians in town to possibly just see like what's the vibe, or should I put them on my record. I think he was trying to create what he considered like a collective of artists he could work with in order to give him what he needed, right? Like he was working with a couple of producers in town. I think one of them was like a Grammy Award winning guy. He was just doing things on a bigger level, and it's certainly bigger than anything I had done. He fully embraced being a pop artist. He understood that mass appeal would eventually net him the sort of freedom, both financially and artistically, to do whatever he wanted. So he was just like really trying to find out how to make them the best and most appealing record he could with what he had, which was, a good amount. And so one day I'm sitting on the ground of my parents' house. I'm like watching TV at my parents' house, and I get a text, and it's like, "This is Carlton Zeus. We need to talk." And I was like, "What the fuck? Who gave me my number?" Like, this is me thinking out loud. I was like, "How did you get my number? I didn't give you my number at all. Who is this? How?" And I reached out to him, and he sort of did the classic Carlton Zeus move, which was like, "Meet me at this bar." That's where he does 1,000% of his business, is at bars. He knows exactly how to get what he needs out of whoever in a fun environment. And so, regardless, I must have met him. I must have met up with him. We did start talking, and because I was doing Gentleman Streets, I had a track that I was writing that I asked him to rap on, and it was actually the like opening bars of the album. So like the album would start with him rapping, introducing the record, and it was a really badass song. And he and I got along, like where I was, and more importantly to him, it's like the purpose that I could sort of fulfill in his needs is I was a singer, I had fans, a considerable fan base, I was good looking, I had momentum, and I was just kind of willing to do whatever. And so this kind of resulted in me sort of being brought into the inner circle of his project. And it was tough sometimes. Like I would work a full day, I would work a full shift, like, and even more than that, I would work like a 10-hour shift or something, come home, just like want to relax, and I'd get a text from him, and it would just be like, "Hey, can you come to the studio right now?" And at 26 or 27, it's like you're getting a text to go work with a Grammy award-winning producer in order to lay down vocals for songs that are going to be on this guy's album who has like a ton of attention. And man, it was worth it to me. I was young. I was able to just work all day and then stay up all night and then go back to work. I was still doing that stupid shit. And so that's kind of what it was. So Zeus, working with Zeus almost became like a full-time job. And he's such a personable person that you never really it never felt like work, right? Like, at least in the beginning, it always felt like friends hanging out who happened to be making art. And the value that I was really getting out of this was learning what it meant to actually make a professional album. There are certain things needed to make a professional product. This is the most important lesson that Zeus taught me working with this guy. Because he, to a fault even, would not settle for like something with his name on it coming out less than perfect. And perfect is an impossible mountain to climb. That's not a possible target to hit. And so he would really suffer for his own art mentally. A lot of mental anguish went into him never being satisfied or never believing that like something was good enough. And so, but I was learning, to whatever degree it related to me, or like that I could relate it to my own project, it was like, it has to be of a certain standard to be considered professional just for it to have a chance to go anywhere. And that was not something I had ever learned. My project sounded cool, but like the one thing missing, I had never had them like professionally mastered. I mean, think about it taking like 5 years for someone in the pop world to explain to me the importance of mastering a record. Nobody in the indie sphere of San Antonio up to this point had ever mentioned why mastering was important. I never even understood. I didn't think about it. I didn't know. I'm assuming that my previous records were mastered, but they certainly weren't done by, guys of like Grammy award-winning producers caliber. So Gentleman Streets, kind of before Zeus really had a kind of like an understanding of what it was going to be, I sent him the track, like a scratch track version. He sent me back like amazing vocals, like this rapping introduction to this song and the whole album. And I put it on there, and we kind of went about our business, and I just wanted him to hear it. Like, when it was all done, I was kind of doing the artistic thing, like, no, I want you to hear the whole thing. And when all the 10 tracks were laid out, and I gave it to him in this very sort of, like, confident, almost like, I don't even know the other way to explain it other than confident, overconfident. I kind of handed it to him, and I was like, in my opinion, I was like, I'm about to blow your fucking mind. And he just listened to it, and he listened to it a couple times, and he just came back to me, and he was just like, bro, it's not good enough, man. Like, the volume of the vocals, where the vocals are sitting, this isn't right. And he asked me not to put him on it, or something like that. Or he, like, asked me not to release it. He was just like, and my brain is a little fuzzy. The album might have already come out, to which he sort of responded with, like, you messed up. Like, this is him talking to me, kind of like older brother to little brother. He was like, dude, you messed up. This was not done right. And I can't promote this on my behalf because I don't want people to hear this. And also, he made the comment that it was now a wasted verse of his because he couldn't promote it, and that those lyrics could have been used elsewhere. Like, very tactical business, which was refreshing to me. I'd never been spoken to this way about the business of being an artist, right? So what ultimately came of, imagine like going through the whole process of putting together the project, the way that I've done so many times before. Like, you conceive this whole thing, you've got the pack, like the artwork, the press photos. I made I played the instruments of every song. Like, I wrote everything. Then you take it to Jared, and Jared and I mixed the thing for weeks, months. And then Jared, whatever he does to master it, whatever his version of mastering was, we master it, and then we do a release, and then we put it out. And then you just kind of, you get, immediately you get this response back that's like, dude, you fucked this up, and it's hurting me. Like, this was the message I got from Zeus. And, like, there's a million ways that I could have taken it, and thankfully, the way I did take it, well, thankfully or not, I don't know. I just decided to keep pushing forward, and by that I meant I took down the album from all stores. I took the 5 best tracks that I thought were the most pop-oriented, like the most accessible to like a pop audience. I took those to Ace One, the producer that had won the Grammy, that Zeus introduced me to and like got me into a session with this guy. He then took the stems and mastered them on these 5 tracks, gave them back to me, and then I re-released Gentleman Streets not as an album but as an EP, and almost like a, I think it's actually like a deluxe edition. That's what it's called on Spotify. The Gentleman Streets Deluxe Edition, which is just 5 songs, and they're mastered by Grammy Award-winning producer Ace One. And so that is the version of Gentleman Streets that I'm now going to get into and explain these tracks. So the first track, Baby I Know. Of note, this was recorded on the same MIDI keyboard that Alan wrote Era Extraña on. Again, we have mutual friends. He had borrowed it, or he had lent it to a friend of mine. That friend lent it to me. And I wrote this song using the same keyboard that he made Era Extraña on, or one of the MIDI controllers. Baby I Know is women love this song. It was actually, of course, it was written about a woman. It was actually written about a woman that I was dating in San Antonio at the time. She was one of the local news women. She was like she was the weather girl. She was one of the weather girls in San Antonio, and she was hanging out in my apartment, and I remember asking her what her work schedule was like casually as we were just kind of hanging out watching TV. And I'll just never forget it. Like, she leaned back, she kind of laid down, she laid her head on the pillow of the couch, and she closed her eyes, and she said, I work tomorrow morning, and then the day after that, and then the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that, and the day after that. And it was very exaggerated, and my heart sort of felt the weight of how tired she was. And that exchange is the entire motivation for the song, Baby I Know. You've been working so damn hard, you know the time. You're so damn tired and it shows. Like, I'm talking to this person laying on my couch, exhausted, and thinking about how she has to work every day for the next, like, foreseeable future. And then, of course, what's important about this song is that it has the line, welcome to these gentlemen's streets. All these other boys you've been dealing with, you can drop them off the corner. All these other kids you've been dealing with, you can drop them off at the corner, come and kick it with me. Like, those are the lyrics, right? Like, very, very flirtatious, very bravado. Welcome to these gentlemen streets. Like, real, man, all that reverb, all that falsetto. It was fun. I had never done this. I had never embraced my own, it's weird to say this, like, out loud, but I had never embraced my own sexuality. Like, the act of being that sort of forwardly, outrightly flirtatious was fun. It was fun. And this one in itself is very flirtatious. So the next track, Give It Up, featuring Carly Garza. Carly, another artist in San Antonio who I had always been a friend of and fan of for years, but was always hoping and looking for, ways to collaborate with different people that I really liked. And so Daniela, at this point, as with most relationships of mine at the time, personal friend and otherwise, Daniela and I were no longer talking to each other. This is the person that inspired me to write electronic music in the first place. Her and I just weren't talking. I don't remember why. We had tried to make an album together. It did not work. We were too fiery. She's an Aries, I'm a Taurus, and that dynamic was very contentious. She was supposed to sing on the song Give It Up. She said no. And then my second choice was Carly. Carly does great. This one is probably, in my opinion, the best melody. Like, this is the catchiest song maybe I've ever written. Cause if your answers I don't get them, it's like music with no rhythm. I'm just searching for a way to get through to you. Like, sometimes I sing that in the shower. Like, it's been 8 years since I released it, but I'm really proud of Give It Up. That's a bop. That's a pop song through and through. And pop songs aren't easy to write. They're very formulaic, but that's kind of the point. It's like, how do you make your own version of something that's been done a million times? And Give It Up was my version of that. I've been trying to figure you out for what seems like a long, long time. And I hope I'm not freaking you out. Yeah. Really, I'm proud of it, man. As a writer, like, I'm proud of all of it, the melody and the lyrics. Now that I'm asking all of these questions, yeah. I'll never forget, too, playing the demo of this for Brandon McCormick. And when he heard this one, he was like, okay, I get it. And he said, keep doing this. So, the third song, True. True is interesting. True is actually the song, I made this beat for Daniela in the sessions that we were doing together. And I liked it so much that I took it back. I emailed her and I was like, I know I sent you this one. I'm going to keep it. This one, in my opinion, is but of, like, on the Mount Rushmore again of, like, especially as a producer and a artist. Like, I'd put this one on my Mount Rushmore, things that I'm so proud that I made. Lost the stems of this song. Don't know how. I was very lackadaisical with session files. Lost the stems of this track, and so this is a mastered version of the demo. That's all I could do. I knew I needed to have it on the record. It is not mixed properly. There's all kinds of horrible frequencies in there. For the most part, it's mixed by me, like, at my house. This is the highest form at the time of what I could do on my computer. I made this song on my computer, did my vocals, and mixed it all, and then just got it mastered along with the rest of these tracks, and just kind of, just did what I could. Good Day, Chris Condi. This Jared believes this is the best song I've ever written. He believes that I really made a mistake by not going all in on this track. This beat, this is exactly me wanting to be Justin Timberlake and Timbaland. This is me 1,000% just trying to ride that vibe of, like, that huge kick, like, snappy snare, and that real kind of like Chris Condi, who in 2022 is quite the sort of, like, I think, like, a sort of queer rapper icon. He lives in New York now, but at the time he was homeless and living on the couch of Jared at the time that I was making this record. And he, in his sort of unassuming yet insanely talented way, Jared tells me the story that Condi was just sort of, like, on the couch while Jared was working on this track, and he just kind of, like, sat up and he was like, yo, I want to rap on this, and Jared was kind of like, okay. And then Jared asked me, to which I also was like, all right, couch guy, come on now. What you got, couch guy? And he delivered what I believe is the best rap verse ever. I don't put him up against any rapper. I don't care. Lil Wayne, Jay-Z, any person. Like, I'm exaggerating clearly, but this rap verse that he drops on Good Day is so beyond expectations of what I had for the guy on the couch. Everything is fucking awesome about, like, his verse is everything that is good in this world. It's the highlight of this record. I listen to it all the time still. He listens to it all the time. He admits and says this is the best thing that he's ever recorded. God intervened through Chris and out into the microphone whatever magic was bottled and caught on the record that day, brother, if I could recreate it, I'd be a Jillionaire. That's Jillion with a G or a J. I don't know. I don't even think that's a real number. But I would have reached it. If I could have found a way to sell whatever Chris was bringing to the studio that day, man, oh God, listen to it. It holds its own. And then the last track, Dreamer. Dreamer is not like a vibe at all. It's a straight up, almost kind of Radiohead-esque song. It's a lot of stacked vocals, and it goes on for a really long time. And this was just me being me. Like, I always have to throw that last song in there with a kind of extended outro that takes you on twists and turns. It's just kind of giving a little extra spice to you if you've gotten all the way through the record. Dreamer is a really cool song. It did not belong with these other tracks. It made more sense with the other 5 electronic songs. If I had released Gentleman Streets Part 2, like the EP, kind of the way that Ryan Adams did, like Love is Hell 1 and 2. If I had done Gentleman Streets 2, and now that I just said that out loud, that is absolutely what I should have done. I am an idiot. I'm an idiot. Damn it. What was I thinking? Why didn't I release the other half? Ugh. I'll tell you why. I'll tell you why in a minute. Dreamer was weird and dark, and another thing that I'm really, really, really proud of as an artist to have made. And that song goes on for about 7 minutes, which is very much not in the pop music realm that I have set aside for this album. But such to say, this album gets re-released. It is mastered this time by Ace One. Carlton Zeus is not even on the album anymore. Didn't make the cut of. I think he had sort of insisted that I take him off before knowing that I was going to go get it redone. So no harm, nothing personal. Everything that he always did was coming from a place of business, which when your intentions are known, when your cards are on the table, nobody can blame you for anything, right? Like, I don't blame Zeus for anything, really. I did end up tracking some stuff for him on his record that came out, which at this point he also no longer has up on streaming. He never credited me for it. I don't know why. The song called Alpha Child, I literally sing the words Alpha Child. I'm like the refrain on the record. He did not give me credit for it. It just kind of came out without my name on the song, and I know that I was in that studio constantly doing that work. And so, again, I trust, if there's anything that I trust, is that Carlton Zeus did what was needed to be done for him to put out what he believed was the best record possible. That guy understands strategy and business in a way that I've never even thought about it before. And all the lessons that I received and took from that process, it was kind of more worth it, really. It's like if that had been the contract between the two of us, where it was like, you're going to do all this work, you're going to like go to different cities with me and play shows, you're going to sing on different things, I'm going to get your vocals, I'm not going to pay you ever. You're just going to do a bunch of work, and I am going to use you, I'm not going to pay you, and I'm not even going to credit you. But what you will learn is how to put out a real product. It's like that knowledge and the experience of getting to sort of see the way that his brain worked at that time was infinitely more valuable, really, than getting my name on a song that isn't even up on streaming anymore, right? Like, what would that have been worth? So, just a really interesting time where I was just like taken under the wing of this other artist who was in a different stratosphere than me, but really saw like potential and taught me what he could. And it was kind of like a Jay-Z Kanye thing where it's like Jay-Z's always been more business minded than artistic, but also extremely talented. Kanye has always been more artistic than business minded, but also really good at business. So that that duo, like that dynamic is sort of like what Zeus and I tapped into, where it's like he was always thinking business and I was always thinking from an art perspective. And we didn't always see eye to eye, but I learned a lot from him, enough to where I was then able to, moving forward, always know how to put out a record that was professional. Everything that I've released since then has finally been of the level that it should be in order to like be given whatever flowers it deserves, right? So Zeus, if you're out there, I know you are out there. We're still following each other on Instagram. Kudos to you, and your music has clearly just gotten better too. So those are the 5 tracks. Gentleman Streets comes out, and the day that I release it, I don't even remember. It must have been my birthday again. It's probably like April something, April 26th maybe. I don't know. 2014, April 26th. I decide I'm going to put together this huge show. I decide this is like the one-off performance of Gentleman Streets. It's going to be this big party. It's at a bar called 502. They give me complete control. I book the whole show. I'm taking the door. I have a backup singer. I've got a DJ. This is my set, like where I'm going to perform like a couple of these tracks. Just completely out, like so fucking out of my comfort zone. Like when I think back on it, it's like, what, man, how far I had come, like how far left I had gone. I had a backup dancer, singer, I had a DJ, and I had a Jimmy Dasher, old Jimmy from Window and from here on out, and who played all the electric guitars on the Raccoon. He was somehow in town, and he just came in and he played guitar live on a couple tracks. Like I just sort of told him what key it was, and he just got up there on stage too. The show was a complete disaster from my set. Everybody else on the set was amazing. Brandon McCormick, who was performing as Dooley at the time, he had a set. His DJ, he's a rapper. He was doing some rap stuff, and he did a set with like the Spurs house DJ. Right, that's how it started. Killed it. Then one of my oldest friends in the industry, Ben Cena, who was based in Austin at the time, but now is out in LA. He brought his whole band and just destroyed it. I mean, he'll always be, he's like one of my favorite people. He's one of the most talented people I've ever met. They showed up and just demolished the stage. It was incredible. And then here I come. No instruments. Me singing into a mic. And let me explain to you the 24 hours or like the couple of like days leading up to this performance. I was, very much of the, like, we have to practice. This has to be perfect. The singer missed all of our rehearsals because work or something. Chris Condi, who I had asked to come do the performance, he showed up one time to my house, didn't rap at all, just kind of sat and, like, listened and was like, okay, I'll be there. The DJ, I think, texted me like that morning, the morning of the performance, and he was just like, I didn't sleep last night. There's an emergency with my dad. I feel like I'm sick. I think I'm gonna throw up. And all of these things, like, there was no amount of planning I could do, seemingly, that would put me in a position to win. And once the ship starts to go down, there's a point when you're on the Titanic and the ship is just going down, when you have to, you can't stop, you can't keep denying it anymore. When I got that text from my DJ like that morning, I believed I was like heading for a disaster. And so it went, Dooley with the Spurs DJ just rocked the house. Ben Cena goes up and just demolishes it with his band. And then I go up and I've got a backup singer who like got there as we're going on stage. He has not practiced with us or performed with us. He hasn't gone over any of the stuff. The DJ, who's like insanely exhausted, he's not in any state to to be performing. You got Jimmy, who's like a great guitar player, and he's just kind of waiting in the wings. And then you've got me, who like has never performed a day in his life without an instrument in his hands. Suddenly, I'm up there, just holding a microphone, and dressed in a fucking suit, Justin Timberlake style, and suddenly realizing like, oh, I wasn't in the Mickey Mouse Club. It's only in that moment when the lights hit, when you're like, oh shit, I don't have 20 years of dancing and singing experience. And from the very beginning, like from the very first song, when the backup singer, who was supposed to stand like in the back to the left, came up to the front and like actually got in front of me, and I think like actually bumped into me as we were singing. Like I'm trying to sing and he's like singing over me wildly. Chris Condi shows up, and all I'll say is that whatever state he showed up in was not fit to perform. There was a point in the track where he just simply stopped rapping, like during his he missed his beat completely, and then started trying, and then there was a point where he just stopped and like stared into the crowd, and I'm pretty sure I just saw him like drooling. I didn't hear from him or see him again for like 5 more years. That happened. The sound on my performance alone was apparently so quiet that everyone in the crowd talking was louder than our music. I had no idea what was going on. And in fact, like when I look back on it, and as I was reminded many times over by many people in the crowd, I was just highly intoxicated. It was my birthday, I was nervous, I was overly confident, and also the Titanic of this performance was already going down. And I went up there just barely able to even stand. And whether or not you're doing it, you got to get through. That's rule number 1 for performance. Don't stop. I pushed through it. We got through it. We got all the songs out. I did a cover of Drake's Just Hold On, We're Going Home, which when we did the rehearsal for it at soundcheck, there were 2 women in the crowd and they loved it. It did not have the same effect to this crowd of people that came to see me play. It was a disaster. It's the worst show I've ever played. It's the lowest moment as an artist I've ever had. I tried as hard as I could to prepare for it. All of the universe conspired against me, seemingly. And it was about 5 seconds after that show ended that I went and just sort of got a breath of fresh air in the back that I really said, okay, I quit. That was when I legitimately quit music. I would not perform again. I've never performed since. It's 2022. That was 8 years ago. I've never performed since, and at least in like a public setting on that level. I've done like little coffee shop, like maybe pick up a guitar and play one song or two. One time in LA in like 2016, I played a little show, and then no, that was it. 8 years ago, man. That's how bad that show was. I have not played or performed since. I received a lot of weird feedback from friends, a lot of mixed messages from other people in the crowd. Some of them were there for me, some of them were there for the other bands, some of them were there to root against me, rightfully so. It was the end of whatever I was trying to do. Whatever bad energy had been rolled off, all of it had just finally dissipated in that moment. At the end of that show, I walked outside and I took a breath and I said, all right, I'm done. It was embarrassing. It was very embarrassing. I cringe thinking about it now. I had no business doing that show. I just didn't. It wasn't me. It wasn't me. Um, Two other takeaways from that show. At the end of the set, it was so bad that I actually like picked up an acoustic guitar and I sang a cover of Joe Cocker's cover of the Beatles song, "Goodbye with a Little Help from My Friends." And people still people still tell me today, they're like, I remember that. Like that sounded right, right? Like me picking up an acoustic guitar. That was home. And the other thing was the band that played after me called The Fishermen. This was Jared Stevens, the guy, my longtime friend and producer, the guy that produced Gentleman Streets. His band closed out the show. They did a cover of Radiohead's Weird Fishes, and they let me sing it. And in that moment, I was able to actually get back up on stage. I came and I sang this song, a song that I've sung a million times, the first ever YouTube cover that I ever put up, and it got like 1,000 plays. The first kind of like video back when YouTube, like 1,000 plays mattered in like 2009. When I sang that song, for one beautiful moment, I was like listening to these like beautiful this music playing around me, live instruments, real stuff. I'm playing a Radiohead song, I'm singing it. I hit the notes. It felt really good. I actually felt kind of elevated in that moment. It was, if there was God just kind of saying like, hey, this is what it should feel like. You'll get back here someday. Not anytime soon. I left with that feeling. And that was the end for a long time. For a long time. That was the end. All motivation to ever perform again was officially gone. Within a couple months, I moved to Austin. I started film school. A year later, I moved to LA. A few years later, I moved back to San Antonio. A few years later, I had some health problems again. Same health problems as before. This time, they just never went away because, they never do. And it was in that really dark place, years later, 5 years later, traveled throughout the country, lived different places, different careers, had lived different lives. I was in my 30s. And it was only in that very far away, dark place that I found myself coming back to playing music. And it was at the behest of Brandon McCormick. Again, my old tried and true friend, one-time manager, longtime friend. We were sitting at a bar, and he was more or less begging me. He was like, dude, do one more album. Just do it your way. Like, let your swan song be on your terms. And those words kind of resonated with me, and I thought, all right, if I was going to do one more album, what would I say? What would it be called? I thought about it for a long time, and as you'll find out on the next record, the name of that album was Exit Music.